The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. From the New Living Translation, Psalm 37, verse 23. Well, I was about to see whether I really believe this or not. What do you think? True or false? The Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail of their lives. I believe it, but it was going to be tested through COVID. You see, I'm a professional speaker and I spend my life at conferences. And in March, I was speaking to the professional speakers right across Australia at our big annual conference. And I remember one lady coming up to me and she said, "Oh, Lisa, I've heard your story so many times, but I always cry. Why do I do that?" It's like, oh, I couldn't answer that. But I was just once again delighted to be able to share, encourage my peers and my colleagues, and we were all together preparing for an amazing year. But while that conference was on, we became very aware that all the engagements were just disappearing out of our diaries. So for me, most of my engagements were either being cancelled or postponed. But little did I know that they would all eventually be cancelled altogether, and that for the last 6 months there would be no work. It's been a really interesting season, trusting God and finding joy when the things that I've relied on were not there. It's easy to say, I'm not what I do. But sometimes when you have no opportunity to do what you do, you've got to start figuring out once again what anchors me. So it's been an interesting season, to say the least. I mean, the first thing we did is we thought, well, let's get creative and make a little program so we could give it to our clients. Then someone said, oh no, you should charge, you're going to need the money. And I'm thinking, no, this isn't going to last very long. We just give something away. It's the heart of what's happening and people are in trouble. So we made a little program called Mini Refresh under my new online name, lisamcsmith.com. So if you want a little bit of encouragement, it's still there. But you know, I looked at that and watched as the words of encouragement went out across my client base, and I realised that I myself needed those words now more than ever. And as the time continued and things just didn't seem to change, and the COVID situation seemed to be saying to us there would be no conferences, not only for this year, but even next year. So all the bookings for next year have also been put on hold or been cancelled. And my husband and I have had to just go back and look at, what do we trust God for? Now, I've got to say to you, I think that we've been trusting God together for the last 33 years because we're in business together, small business. And you know what it's like? It's like this. It's up and down. You never know what you're going to earn. You never know from year to year. You have good years, you have terrible years. But you know what? God's been faithful. We've felt the peace of God whether we were on the high highs or the low lows. And so here we were back again in that situation of completely unknown. What is it that God requires of us in this season? And I've got to tell you that the first thing I did was take a lot of long walks and talk to God and tell him, well, what are you going to do about this? And I felt that God definitely was saying, what are you going to do in response to this, Lisa? How are you going to behave? Who are you going to trust? And I do feel like he's given me a shaking along with many others to say, what's the next season of your life look like? Maybe this has been a pause button has been pressed, a chance to stop and review and say, are we just going to do more of the same? Or is God actually inviting us into a new season, a new opportunity to launch out into the deep and try something new? You know, I started to figure out, well, what is it that I'm good at? And then I thought, well, I'm pretty good at storytelling. I've certainly had lots of practice. Thought maybe I could teach people storytelling. And And so I started a little masterclass and we let people come on and have a shot at it and see if we could build confidence and build frameworks. I just want to say to you, I've recognised through this process that people's stories are really important, that we need to sometimes write down our story and actually see the highs and lows, what you have come through, what you have stood through, what you have collapsed under, and where you have seen evidence of God uphold you. I was thinking about some moments in my life, moments when my little tiny second baby was just limp in the doctor's hands. I had to trust that that baby would live. I remember when my little boy, I think he was about 11, fell out of a boat. Like Colin was just taking one of the kids up the river in the Murray with a kneeboard, and my little boy didn't have a life jacket on because the boy, the cousin on the back, had it on. And a big boat came along and Matthew literally just bounced out of the front of the motorboat. And Colin just ran straight over him. I can't imagine what it was like and what prayers my husband prayed as he waited for our little boy to come up. I guess that was it, just waiting for him to bob up. And you know, he did. He bobbed up further down the river because the boat went that way and the river runs fast that way. And Matthew just puts his hand up and goes, "I'm okay." Instead of the motor literally slashing my son's head, he didn't have a life jacket on, did he? So he'd gone right underneath deep in the water and the motor had just slashed his arm and everything was okay. It was my mum and dad's 50th wedding anniversary weekend and we'd had such an amazing time as a family. And I remember just going, "God, I trust you. Help us to get to the children's hospital. Help us to get there." Like they're moments, but they're moments that are defining because like, who do you trust? So I'm looking back at the time when Colin and I were really struggling in our marriage and wondering, are we going to make it? You know, it's hard when you're so different. I mean, that's the crazy thing about marriage, I think. You know, you're attracted to someone that's really opposite to you. And then you have to spend the rest of your life learning to live with them. I think God has a great sense of humour about that. I mean, there's nothing like marriage to really make you to lean into God and to learn how to love another. And then, of course, you have children and you can't raise children confidently without knowing that God is with them when you're not. There's been so many challenges over the years. And yet, we're all still standing. We're loving God. We feel closer than ever because he has carried us. You know, people say, "Oh, God's just a crutch." I'm like, a crutch? God is so much more than a crutch. He's the full stretcher. Do you know, like, I don't need a crutch. I need someone to carry me at times. Just like in that picture where you see two sets of footsteps in the sand and then one when Jesus carries us. I have definitely felt carried so many times. You know, I think about the times when incredible doors opened and, you know, we had opportunities to speak in big arenas in the USA. But sometimes I was so sleep deprived because I had a little baby that just was awake all night and slept all day. And I wasn't coping. And then I'd suddenly have to go on the stage and present. I remember crying side stage and my husband praying for me, "God, give her the strength for 1 hour." I get on and it was like God flicked the switch. And I was a new woman. I know what it's like to be carried. This is why our stories matter. When we look back, sometimes we don't realise how much God has carried us and how true this scripture is that the Lord directs the steps of the godly. He delights in every detail. Because when my life is troubled, I turn to him more than ever. I love this too. This is out of Psalm 23. It's one of my favourite Psalms. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. He refreshes my soul. No matter whether it's good or bad times, he refreshes me. And Psalm 37 verse 23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Good man or woman are ordered by the Lord. And he delights in his way. That's from the King James Version. Do you know, he's got us. But we need to remember our stories. We need to recall them and recount them. I think about the people of Israel, you know, telling the next generation how God parted the sea for them, how he brought water out of the rock for them, how he brought quail out of the sky and they had meat, how he had manna. You know, like every day there was something to eat on the ground. I mean, 40 years. That's a long time to become reliant on the Lord for absolutely everything. So I hope they were good at telling their stories. It reminded me of a time when Colin and I were driving through the centre of Australia. We took the biggest amount of time off we'd ever taken, 3.5 months, to take our children up through the centre of Australia and across to the west. And we were driving from Halls Creek to Fitzroy Crossing. Look, it was sort of dusk and people had said to us, you shouldn't drive at dusk. But our car had broken down in Halls Creek and we'd missed going with our friends to the next part and we said, we'll catch up. So we thought, oh, we'll catch up. We'll just keep driving through the night. So we're driving on this big open country road and suddenly in the distance, but not too far, there was a cow on the road. Couldn't really see how big the cow was, it just was a cow on the road. And we were going fast, towing a caravan. So my husband just moves lanes, just thinks, well, I'll just get out of the way of the cow. Now the cow didn't seem to recognise that we had made this wise manoeuvre. Why did the cow cross the road? It's a very good question. The cow didn't just cross the road, he ran. He ran across the road towards our car and there was precision timing, and as he ran straight into the front corner of our car, I was in the passenger seat and I saw the head of this cow almost come through my window. It was so tall. It had taken out the side mirror. It's like the cow rolled all the way down the side of the van, hit the corner of the front of the van and then was gone. It took us about 80 metres to stop the car. We were shaking. We knew that we had just had an encounter with the potential of death. Colin and I looked at each other. The kids had been singing in the back seat, but they certainly stopped singing when I screamed and braced. And Colin just recognised, wow, like just a couple of more metres across in front of us and would have been dead. There's no way that we would have been wiped out. It was just seconds difference. And once we calmed down and recognised we're all safe, we thought, well, we better go and drag the cow off the road. So we started walking down the road in the dark. We're looking for the cow. We're walking a long way when the realisation hits us, the cow is not here. The cow has actually got back up and walked off the road. You know, I don't usually pray for cows, but I prayed for the cow that night. Please, God, let that cow be all right. Oh, like, it wasn't a little cow. It was huge. And yet that cow walked away. And we drove on slowly, praying all the way, recognising that God had rescued us, angels watching over us. Who can explain these things? All I know is that I worship God all the way to the next town. I was so grateful, so thankful, and I didn't lose that feeling for the rest of that trip. I had a recognition. He was directing our steps. It wasn't our time. There was a pathway forward. And you know, you think you're never going to forget that feeling. You're going to stay in that moment. You're going to stay close to God. You're going to trust him. You're going to walk with him. But you lose it. You walk away. You get caught up with the stuff of life. And I was thinking about this in COVID. There's sometimes one day has run into another and we haven't even known what day of the week it is. We're so used to getting up and going somewhere, travelling and speaking. And here we were, a little family in our home, going nowhere. Thinking about creative ideas, asking God, what should we do in this season? So it's been fun teaching people to be able to create their own story. And I have had an appreciation of what it is that is creating my future. You know, I recognise that, you know, I love worship, so I walk along the beach or through the park or walk the dog and I sing away because it's comforting, it soothes my soul. It stops me worrying about money and allows me just to be in God's presence and enjoy if it's a sunny day or a wet day, just to be grateful. But you know what else I've been doing? I've been starting to use more declarations. I've been starting to be more assertive about what am I confessing over my life now, while it's really tough. And I have been using some declarations out of a fabulous book called Declarations. And listen to some of these. Even in the midst of uncertainty, I live from a place of unshakable joy. My joy levels do not depend on circumstances or how I feel. I need that. I love to laugh out loud and I purpose to do it frequently. That's been good having a COVID puppy because we have laughed a lot, even when he digs holes in our grass that we are very unhappy about. I experience great joy in my life even before I see the breakthroughs. I naturally know when to weep with those who weep and rejoice with those who rejoice. So we've done some crying and some laughing. I am a carrier of infectious joy and I release joy to others. My joy and laughter are powerful weapons of spiritual warfare and they help create breakthrough in my own life and the lives of others. That's what I've been confessing over my life. What are you confessing over your life? Is it time to write new declarations for the coming season? Is it time to just look back on your journey and recall all the great things that God has done? And to capture it so that it's never lost for your children. So that you've written it so that you can teach it to your children and your children's children. How will they know unless they hear the testimony of God in your life? We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. That's our story. We need to keep telling our stories. Just a little word of warning, you don't need to exaggerate them. Because some people do that. They just seem to feel like they need to help God out. Let me tell you, all the stories that God has formed in all our lives are more than enough. We are more than enough because we are created by Him, for eternal purposes. We don't need to be more than what we already are. We don't need to have a bigger, more spectacular story. Because truly, what are the things that matter right now? The things that people all around the world crave for? Somebody to love, somewhere to live, and something that we think is meaningful to do. We've got everything we need. God is with us and for us. And I want you to go into this next season rejoicing and declaring that you're a person of breakthrough. Bye.
This is how I find my balance.